Welcome back to Locky Top Boys. Special episode for you. Locky Top Boxing. Got our good friend Ron too, friend of the program, number one fan, number one boxer I know. Joining us with us today. We'll be talking about the upcoming Fury and Ngannou fight, which is actually tomorrow. We'll be talking about a little bit of Jake Paul and influencer boxing. We'll be talking about a little bit of Devin versus Ryan Garcia and the craziness following that. And then we'll kind of close out with two topics: a little boxing versus MMA debate, and dark horses, or what I like to call who next, describing upcoming boxers that y'all should be aware of. But first, I'll explain a little bit of why I'm doing this. Ron and I have been arguing about boxing and MMA for maybe 10 years now. Went to college with Ron. Also went to high school with Ron, so known him for a long time. I have no boxing experience. Look at me. I guess I would qualify to be a heavyweight, but I would die in 5 seconds in the ring. No formal boxing training. Lot of training in betting boxing, though. Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience boxing?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Ron, making the guest appearance for, I guess, what are we calling this segment? Squaring the Circle. Yes. Like Naveen said, we've known each other for a long time. I didn't get into boxing until probably my senior year of college, when I was 20-ish, when my metabolism still allowed me to eat like shit. I discovered boxing through this small gym in New York called Mendez Boxing. Rep them till I die. Donde se hacen los campeones. Walked in. It was a musty room, probably only 500 square feet, on the corner of 28th and 6th Avenue. My first trainer was a Mexican guy named Italy. I shit you not. He had a beret and I think like a Puma logo tattoo, but learned the sweet science the hard way. Grinding, taught me a lot about life. Just overcoming your limits, mental and physical. Like digging in deep. Also, in some way, found more inner peace than I had felt ever before that, just through violence. So there's some kind of weird counterintuitive thing there. Too much to unpack in this episode. But yeah, have tried to live the fight game as much as possible. Missed my window on competing. I'm 32 now, so probably not gonna opt for Golden Gloves or anything, but have been following the fight game for a long time, alongside a brief stint training for it. So yeah, I love boxing. Boxing all the way over MMA.
All right, let's get down to it. So tomorrow we got a huge matchup. It's actually in Saudi Arabia, interestingly enough. For your East Coasters, it starts at 11 a.m. Probably will end around 4 p.m. Weird timing for such a huge fight, but we got Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. Anthony Joshua is a British boxer. They're both heavyweights, and obviously Ngannou is coming, full circle, coming from UFC now into boxing. He recently fought Tyson Fury. That was a lot closer match than a lot of people kind of expected. We had the split decision there, which Fury won. Controversial at that. But I want to get your thoughts, Ron. Like, what do you think about this fight? Like, we got Anthony Joshua as like a -350 favorite, Ngannou's +275, and we have the over/under at 6.5 rounds out of 10. Any thoughts for the people? Where can they make a quick buck on this fight?
Yeah, so I'll go out and caveat that for the first heavyweight boxing MMA crossover, I gave Ngannou basically no shot in hell. I, like many other people, were surprised with how well he adapted from the octagon to the squared circle. Obviously the left hook that dropped Fury in round 3 was a shock to everyone, probably both to Ngannou and Fury themselves in the ring. And I will say, of all the crossovers I've seen, from Ben Askren to Tyron Woodley, and Nate Diaz has always flirted with crossing over with boxing. Ngannou got my respect. I think he deserves the fight. First and foremost, you can't just. Many have tried to go in and take Tyson's crown. Many have failed. Deontay Wilder is the only other guy to drop Tyson Fury. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind. So he's in a rare company right now for someone who has taken Tyson to the distance in a highly contested bout. Ngannou clearly has power. Like a lot of other non-boxers, though, I think you see that he's the footwork, the spacing, the timing is different, totally different in boxing versus MMA. But because of his last performance, I don't know if plus 300 is over or underestimating. I think I'm still inclined to give it to the AJ being the trained boxer. He's got a devastating right hand. He's bounced back since getting getting upset by I'm not allowed if I know I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but Mexican Homer Simpson Jr. That was awesome, one of the greatest upsets. But since then, he's bounced back pretty strong. So AJ's back to I'd say he looks like he's in peak form. So I would still give the edge to AJ here.
Cool, yeah. I mean, thinking about betting this fight, one of the things we like to do here on Lucky Top is, if everybody thinks it's going to be one thing, we like to do the other. Fading the public in NFL. This version I like to call fading the barber shop. Like when you go talk with your barber about, oh man, who you like this weekend? They're going to give you a very public answer. Typically, you want to do exactly the opposite of what you see here. And I think this is a huge case for that, right? We just saw Ngannou debatably almost crush Fury, right? Knocked him down. He was a plus 1,000 underdog. So that means the money is going to be on Ngannou. I think that's a pretty clear thing. And, as experts in betting, we want to do the opposite. So we want to probably bet Joshua this time. It's just like NFL. If you see the Carolina Panthers getting crushed by 40 one week, the next week they're going to cover the spread. This is the same thing. So that's my take there. And I think more interesting is this over under. It's 6.5 rounds out of 10. I think there's some argument for over here again. Ngannou's got a strong chin. Joshua, maybe not as strong chin, but more experience, probably more conditioning too. So I'm just calling it out there. So if you can do some sort of same game parlay, Joshua in the over, that would have probably hit. But what I like is probably Joshua in decision, and that's plus 330. So you get a nice 3-1 on your money there. So I think I think that's definitely a good take for us. But one thing I want to talk to you about, Ron, is is there anything different about this fight, given that it's in Saudi Arabia? Is there anything weird about how they're kind of running this?
Yeah, that's well. First, I want to say I completely agree with that pick. I think the under is a bit of a trap. There's definitely questions with Joshua's chin. We've seen him get stopped. We know that Tyson, or we can extrapolate that Tyson Fury has potentially better chin than Joshua. You've seen Tyson get rocked and get back up and regain his composure. We've seen Joshua struggle in that same circumstance. But then again, I think Joshua plus over, he outboxes, maybe Ngannou catches him, but Joshua should be able to easily outbox him for the 10 rounds. So I like that pick too. As for Saudi Arabia, I was listening to Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya. They run two of the biggest promotions in boxing talk recently. I think it's interesting. Saudi, the Crown Prince is definitely, spreading his oil money around, and he's not shy to spend it, across other sports as well. So I think the one thing that's probably different is that so far they have a good track record of making mega fights. We'll get into this a bit later. um, over the boxing incumbents, the multiple promoters, the multiple sanctioning bodies, the multiple networks you have to deal with. Saudi Arabia is just like, we'll throw money at the problem. And so far it's working.
Cool. Awesome. So the next kind of topic we want to talk to, or the next fight, is like brand new, hot off the press, right? We got Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. I think Mike Tyson, arguably one of the last like heavyweight, everybody knows, your mom knows who Mike Tyson is, type of deal. That famous type of boxer. I feel like kind of universally loved or hated, like very polarizing figure. And same thing with Jake Paul, man. He's popular with people that are under, I guess, 25 years old, and hated by everybody over 25 years old. So interesting fight, kind of like influencer boxing versus the old school. Any thoughts on this fight, man?
Yeah, I wanted to hate Jake Paul, and to some extent, I still I'm still wary of him, but I think he's proven himself over especially his past two fights. You're always going to see the critics online saying every fight's rigged. He's paying them all his opponents to dive, but he's taken on real boxing competition. He lost the split decision to Tommy Fury. First of all, I thought he was going to get creamed in that one, but it was a close fight. That's when he really had my attention, and since then he's beat two actual professional boxers. So I think at some point you got to give Jake his flowers. Do I think he'll ever be world champion? No shot in hell. I think he'll get humbled at some point. He wants to fight Canelo. That's a bad idea, Jake. You don't want that CTE. You don't breed, as much as he claims to breed, live boxing. Canelo's been boxing since he was probably like 6 years old. So I think Jake's at this point, earned his right to fight pro boxers. I think he's in a separate class than the other influencer boxers that you see, like KSI. Jake has really taken it to the next level. As for this fight, I don't understand it. I think maybe, do you have any insight into
dude, isn't this a lose-lose for Jake Paul? Like just strategically, right? If you're Jake Paul's promoter, right? If you beat Mike Tyson, you beat a 60-year-old man. If you lose to Mike Tyson, you lost to a 60-year-old man, right? So I don't see that much of a win here. I think it's mainly because like the last big stage he was on with Tyson Fury's brother. What's his name? Tyson Fury's
Tommy
brother?
Fury?
Tommy Fury, right? He lost, right? Then he kind of went to like, all right, let me get back. Let me fight like two, I guess, worse boxers. They're still professionals, but not, at the scale of Tommy Fury. And I feel like this is a get back game. Like he's going to let it fly. He's going to really, like, this is his big shot. But man, like it doesn't seem like a win choosing this opponent, right? Like if Mike Tyson was 45, I think it would be like, okay, that's pretty legit. But the guy is 58 years old, like as old as our parents, like imagine your dad getting in a ring with like a very jacked, very prepared, like 25-year-old. And dude, like what's sick is that people are going to watch, man. Like he's a master of marketing. And that's one thing I wanted to add to your giving Jake flowers. It's like, number one, he's gotten pretty far, probably like boxing like 6 years, versus everybody else who's been training professionally for their whole life. But what he's better at, man, is marketing, Instagram, right? He's grinded that for probably 10, 15 years. So he knows how to sell a fight. That's what I really respect about him. And he, seems to put the work in. I was pretty impressed also with Tommy Fury versus Jake. Like, obviously not like, perfect technical boxing. Not that I know how to, see that and describe it, but man, it just doesn't seem like, either way, if you win or lose this match, like it's not really a win for Jake. So those are my thoughts on that. Like, I just don't, what do you think? Like they're going to have to do, like, there's a difference in weights, right?
Yeah. So to add some context to the situation, Jake's in his mid-20s. I don't remember if he's 25 or older at this point. Tyson's 60, pushing 60. They're going to break a record for the old. I think it's a record for the oldest. Jake is going to have the record for having the oldest boxing opponent ever. So prior to this fight, Bernard Hopkins had that crown at 51 years old. He got knocked out in his last fight. But they call him the alien for a reason because he was just timeless. But Jake, let's not forget that Jake fought Anderson Silva. Silva was 47 years old. And, I also gave him some credit for that fight because I think one or two fights before that, Silva absolutely floored Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who was at one point a very respected boxer many, many moons ago. He was the son of the Mexican legend Chavez Sr. So I wouldn't say Silva was completely washed, but, he's fighting people past their prime. This is just taken to an ultimate extreme of fighting someone who's 5 years from retirement age. So I think for them, it's probably a money thing. I understand it from Jake. He's even said that he wants to keep moving up the ranks of the professional ladder, but he's going to take the money fights where they're available. And this is a Netflix deal, first of its kind. Like you said, Jake's a marketing genius. So it makes sense from his side. I don't know why Tyson's doing it. I actually think Tyson, whatever his financial situation, I wouldn't have stepped in the ring in this exhibition. And also the other thing about this is Jake's a cruiserweight. That's between 175 and 200. Mike Tyson is a heavyweight. Let me 1 second. That's there's no upper bound on that. There's no cap, but obviously you probably can't. You probably don't want to be 400 pounds fighting in the heavyweight division. But they're going to have to find a catch weight. We don't know if this is a sanctioned boxing fight or exhibition. If any of y'all have had the misfortune of watching Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., that was eye cancer.
Robbery. Yeah. So one last question on this topic, then we can head on to the next one. But is Jake Paul good for boxing or good for fighting in general?
Yeah, that's also, very controversial hot topic. I'll give you my take. Obviously, there's mixed opinions on this. So Jake's done a couple good things besides, working on his footwork and letting his hands go. He started a promotional company, MVP Promotions. Their most notable fighter is Amanda Serrano. She's one of the best female boxers right now. So at least on that side, he's promoting real talent. He has said fighters in it under MVP have said that he's doing some things to flip the original model, maybe more equitable pay, maybe giving boxers more upside. So I think he's probably, trying to, but fighting's a brutal sport. It's you're in the ring by yourself, but along the way, there's a lot of people that can siphon money away. Just ask Mike Tyson and Don how he feels about Don King. So I think on the promotional side, he's probably doing some good things. I believe that he's trying to advocate for fighters, having become a fighter himself. He also started a nonprofit called Boxing Bullies. I love that. I was not really, drawn to physical confrontation when I was younger. I was probably more on the bullied side than the bully side. So but like I said, I found weirdly inner peace through violence. And I think that he's probably doing some good through that nonprofit. So overall, I think he's a net good. Obviously, I don't love not a big fan of the trend of influencer boxing. When you watch it as someone who has trained seriously and respects the sport, it's kind of just cringe.
Yeah. I kind of view influencer boxing kind of like celebrity game in NBA or something, or celebrity game in Pro Bowl. It's like, people that aren't naturally gifted in boxing, it's not going to be visually appealing for a lot of people unless you get like someone crazy good or etc. But I think Jake's good for boxing in the sense that anything that's like generating eyeballs. And what I do respect about Jake Paul is he fights at least 2 to 3, maybe even 4 times a year. And that's one of my major gripes about boxing is that, you might want to see Tyson Fury, but you got to wait, year and a half to see him next. So that's one of the things I might bring up later in our debate, but that's one of the things Jake does. And he keeps it interesting. Like on the influencer side, it's funny, man. Like I watched a lot of YouTube. I was never really into like being influenced by, a single person, especially if they only do YouTube, but they used to make music videos. Now they fight each other. It's like, what's next? Like I don't know, like advanced warfare. Like, what's the next step? How do you escalate from boxing? So that's pretty interesting for me. But yeah, I think overall, I got much more respect for Jake Paul, out of all the fighting than any of his influencing. All right,
Yeah.
Our next topic is Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney. This one is all over the news, man. Like this is the one you can really get deep into. We'll take a look at it from a couple angles, but just to give you guys like backside, like Devin and Ryan are pretty close in age. They've known each other since they were like 15 or 16, basically teenagers. They fought 6 times as amateurs, and they're 3-3 versus each other. But yeah, like this has so much heat associated to it. So Ron, why don't you explain like what's going on with Ryan Garcia, man?
Yeah. So I think let's see. I actually think there's an interesting parallel here. To use an analogy that may be more familiar to some of the millennial boxing fans that are tuning in. You can see Naveen's background is a screenshot of one of the greatest to lace it up, or 2 of the greatest to ever lace it up, Money Mayweather and the Golden Boy. I actually think, from both fighting styles and also how they're trending, you could, there's some parallels between Devin Haney and Floyd Mayweather. They both, fight out of the Philly shell. They're both, technical boxers. They're not known for knockout power. They're known for cruising to decisions, outboxing their opponents. Meanwhile, you got Ryan Garcia and, the Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya. Outside of the fact that they're both Mexican American, they both, not too hard on the eyes, good-looking guys. Ryan is promoted by Oscar, and recently, Oscar's infamous for his his drug use. He was a big cocaine guy, and there's some unflattering pictures of him in fishnets. He had pretty wild period, as you expect anyone who runs into a ton of fame and probably doesn't have the right people around him. And Ryan, there's been erratic behavior. He's been tweeting all kinds of stuff. He's not going to get too into it, but he's spent a lot of time with the likes of Andrew Tate, and he's trying to hang out with Alex Jones, tweeting about the Epstein list and that kind of stuff. He's also people have noted that in recent videos he used to have a higher pitched voice. He's still fairly young, and in recent videos that have surfaced, his voice is super deep and raspy. People have kind of speculated, is this because he's abusing? He's openly admitted drinking and smoking weed. That's not too uncommon. Probably plenty of boxers do that, but people are speculating, is he doing harder drugs? Is he partying? Is he even taking training camp seriously? So there's questions on his mental health. There's questions on his substance abuse. You can see why I draw the parallels to Oscar De La Hoya, beyond just the Mexican ethnicity and the fact that they're offensive-minded fighters. So yeah, there's a lot swirling around Ryan Garcia right now.
Yeah, I mean, just to note, some of the stuff that's been going on his Instagram, like he's first thing I heard is like he had a mole in his camp for his recent fight versus Tank. Tank hit him with a kidney shot, and he never really recovered from that. Obviously, he had that to deal with. Then he had basically he had one video that come out that suggested that he might commit suicide. There was one video suggesting drugs, another video of him trying to expose that he has dealt with the Illuminati and Bohemian Grove and all that kind of mess. And as Ron said, he's been like ultra red pilled real fast. And this is like a very, very, like if you know someone that's manic or has dealt with mental health, it's a clear spiral and that he's on. So much so that see people like Stephen A or people like other boxing commentators are just saying like, hey, this might be a fight that you need to cancel because this guy's fucking crazy. So that's another thing that's come out of this is like, we got to worry about the fight, and then we got to worry about this guy mentally breaking down. Meanwhile, we got Devin Haney like leaking footage of Ryan getting kind of smoked earlier on in his career.
Oh, that was Ryan leaking footage of Devin Haney getting smoked by Tank.
Oh, sorry. We had that situation go on, and that's just added a lot of fuel to the fire. Is that proper bro code or boxing code? Very old footage being leaked, that kind of thing. But man, like this is something that's like really actively every day we're getting new updates. Today's update, I watched. Now I'm hooked. Right, once you put Bohemian Grove, like I'm in. So he said that like he lost all his social media accounts. Yeah, whoever's handling him has froze his money as well. So he's just on an island, basically. I don't know, recovering or training or whatever he's doing, just focusing on boxing. I think that will help him. Less you are on social media, just in general in life, probably the better. Probably needs to get away from Instagram and Alex Jones and Andrew Tate as well. So that's something interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about like Haney's rep? Like we know Ryan's going crazy, but like anything about Haney himself?
Yeah, and I think the sad thing about all of this is prior to Ryan losing that getting knocked out by Tank, he was it wasn't too long ago where he was being compared alongside Tank, Haney, Shakur Stevenson, some of the best up-and-coming boxers in the game. So it's just sad, personally, as a fan of the fight game, to see a top prospect, whatever he's going through, all this chatter not relating to, him training, him working towards his goals, him bouncing back from his first defeat. I think this is a lot of, I hope he gets it together. I hope he surrounds himself with the right people and gets back, back to the good path, because he still has a lot of potential. Yeah, he has time to turn it around. So moving on to Haney, Haney's had a lot of skeptics and critics. There was the brief chapter where people were calling him the email paper champ. And just to give a little bit of background about that, what does that mean? So there are 4 sanctioning bodies in boxing. There's the WBA, it's the oldest. They have multiple distinctions, one being the interim champion, which is lower than the regular champion. And then the highest one is the super champion, which is where if you hold the WBA belt and another body's belt, they consider you above, the regular champion. So there's also the WBC. This is the body that is the most prestigious. Generally, people view the boxer with the WBC belt as the true division champion. The WBC makes its fighters defend its belt every year. So sometimes when you hear about fighters vacating belts because they're moving up weight classes or they're ducking somebody, cough, cough, Floyd. That's usually because they have a mandatory every year, and maybe they're, for various reasons, they want to make that fight. Then you have the WBO and the IBF. Those are the 2 newest commissions. So what happened with Haney was he was at one point the interim WBC champion, Lomachenko at the time, I think, had some claim to the title. I forget the details around it, but Haney was basically informed via email that he was upgraded from the interim to the regular WBC champion. And again, remember, the WBC is the most prestigious belt. So after that, people were basically just went to town trolling him. You know, you're a paper champion, you're an email champion. You didn't actually beat the regular champion to get the belt. But I think since then, you know, I think he's really shed that label. Obviously, he had that big win over Kambosos. Kambosos beat Lomachenko to get all 4 belts. That was Kambosos beat Teofimo, to get all 4 belts. Teofimo had beat Lomachenko to become undisputed. So it went from Teofimo to Kambosos, and then Haney beat him and became undisputed. So that was legit, you know. And since then, he's been on a tear. He moved up to 140, absolutely crushed his competition. And he was looking good. I think he's really done enough to silence all the paper champ critics. But I think there's still some lingering questions, you know, because why hasn't he fought Gervonta Davis? Why hasn't he fought Shakur Stevenson? I mean, Ryan Garcia, they're making the fight happen. I don't think Haney was ducking there, but there's definitely some question marks on why he hasn't fought tougher competition if and when the fights have been available.
Yeah, I think a lot of the same, like you made the parallel to Floyd earlier. I think a lot of the same criticisms apply too, right? Like not that powerful of a punch, very defensive fighter, kind of boring, right? So I think that's why he kind of hasn't broken through in public popularity as much as the other guys. It seems like, you know, Tank with that win over Ryan is kind of like the, you know, the stud in the division. And he definitely seems like he has the, you know, he has the silencer, which is that uppercut, and that seems to get the job done for him. But yeah, very, very, very interesting topic. Like, one, we want to make sure that Ryan Garcia is okay, right? Like, then we want to see the fight, right? Like, it's a step 1, step 2 kind of thing, and we want to make sure that, you know, we get to see 2 of the fighters that we wanted to see at their best. Like, this should be a big money fight. Anything with Ryan Garcia is related is pretty big money, right? He is a huge star on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like, you know, tens of millions of followers. So, you know, anytime you get to go face him, you know, that's a payday for you. So I think that will be a definitely interesting matchup.
Yeah, what's your take? Who do you got in that?
I got Devin Haney, man. I think that, you know, you go with the guy that's mentally there and that's focused on boxing, right? Ryan, a lot of distractions, right? Although I think Ryan definitely has more power than Haney, like, and he could like knock him out. But in these divisions, we don't really see as much of the knockouts unless it's Tank or someone else like that. But definitely very, very valid fight, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll definitely rush and stream it. I won't necessarily pay-per-view it, but I will find a way to watch this fight. All right. I think we're now at the point in the show that we want to have the debate we've had offline for the past 10 years, MMA versus boxing, right? Just to set up some context. I'm a big MMA guy. Not that I dislike boxing, but I just think that it's a little bit more fun than watching boxing. I really am a big fan of Dana White and the way that he does things. And it answers a lot of my problems with boxing pretty well, right? Like, there's no ducking in MMA, right? Dana White doesn't allow it. Obviously, Ron, I will give it to you. Money wise, we have a long way to catch up to you, boxing fans, in terms of like money fights. There's no doubt about it. But like, you know, for a sport that's started in 1993, it's pretty fucking good, man. I think it's pretty entertaining product. It's marketed well. I know a lot about every fighter in a lot of divisions, whereas in boxing, I don't. I typically know like maybe 10 fighters total. I know, Ron, you probably have a lot more experience, a lot more exposure to boxing because you're a huge fan and you boxed But yeah, those are my major gripes. I know, Ron, you probably want to explain, cross-examine me on that, but so I'll let you go on why boxing is better.
Yeah, I'll take the high road, and I think I'll skip the MMA is just a bunch of guys dry humping each other for 5 minutes at a time. But let me before we get into the back and forth, I think I think you make some valid points. Um, you know, Obviously you can see my background is the highest grossing fight ever that happened, in my opinion, 5 years too late. So there is a long track record in boxing of having, exciting superstars, exciting prospects, mega fights that just never happen. And I was curious, and I think it might be interesting context for everyone watching. Why don't they make the big fights? Why does UFC put the two top contenders against each other, and why can they consistently do that, across weight classes year after year? And I think there's like some nuance here. I don't have the answers. If I had the answers, I'd probably be in the fight game making millions of dollars. But I think, unlike UFC, where you have one promoter, Dana White, who owns the league, all the fighters are promoted under his stable. I'm not sure if there's multiple network deals or a single network deal, but I think, it's probably
it's just
simpler.
ESPN and pay-per-view.
There you go. So you have one network, one promoter, all the fighters are under that promoter. And you don't have to deal with multiple parties. Meanwhile, in boxing, you have the promoter, you have the platform or the network, and then you also have, like Naveen said, boxing is a big money sport. So it's not uncommon to see the superstars like Floyd walk away with high eight figure purses. So, the negotiations get a little bit tricky at times between two superstars. So starting with the promoter side, just going through the top, you have Matchroom, which is run by Eddie Hearn out of the UK. They promote, the likes of Anthony Joshua, Triple G, Regis Prograis, who Haney just kind of floored when he moved up to 140. And they have affiliation with DAZN, which is the newest network, streaming only, to the boxing game. Then you have Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya. He used to have a bigger stable, but when I checked right now, the biggest name under his roster is Ryan Garcia. Then you have the Boxing Illuminati, PBC, Al Heyman. These are the big money guys. And when I read you, they have Canelo Alvarez, Errol Spence, both Charlos, David Benavidez, Adrian Broner, Terrence Crawford, Tank, Caleb Plant. So their roster is absolutely stacked. But amongst the promoters, they also have a reputation for being more opaque. Some of this probably comes with being able strategic, being able to negotiate bigger purse splits, more upside for the promoter and their fighters. I think there's a reason why the top fighters have all signed with PBC. Canelo used to be Golden Boy, but now he's PBC. So he's, I think that was a money move. And then you have Top Rank, Bob Arum. He's been in the fight game basically forever. He's 91 years old. He's got Tyson Fury, Inouye, who I think is number one or number two pound for pound, Lomachenko, Devin Haney, Shakur, Teofimo. So those are kind of the big players on the promoter side. So this fight, Ryan versus Haney, is actually, I think, a great sign that you can have two competing promoters, Golden Boy and Top Rank, working together to put two superstars, in their own right, fighting at sort of near their primes. So I hope more of that continues. And then you have the platforms, like I said, DAZN, which is a newest entrant. They're streaming only. They work with Matchroom, MVP, Jake Paul, Most Valuable Promotions, Jake Paul, and Golden Boy. Then you have Showtime, which works with PBC pretty much only. If anyone remembers, Floyd got that massive deal from Showtime, basically highway robbery. Then you have ESPN, which is primarily affiliated with Top Rank, and you have other smaller networks like TNT Sports. You can kind of imagine the permutations and all the hoops you have to jump through. When you have multiple promoters, they're going to advocate for their own share of the gate of pay-per-view buys, of network revenues, and then where there's not affiliation, where the two fighters are not promoted under the same stable, or there's a different network affiliation, then you get into the messy, the muck of backroom deals and handshakes. And I think, kind of the misalignment, multiple promoters, multiple networks, that definitely contributes friction into making big fights happen. But I think we're turning a corner. I'm encouraged by the recent mega fights. Tank and Ryan was number 6 overall in of all time pay-per-view buys of any boxing fight. You're getting Ryan, Haney. You're getting Fury, Usyk. So I think boxing's moving in a better direction.
Yeah. So one thing I'll also want to add to the argument is like this problem with the having 4 kind of organizations also compounds with the number of weight classes, right? Like UFC has 9 to boxing's 18. Sometimes boxing only goes up like 5 or 6 pounds per weight class. I just want to get your thoughts about that, right? Like I know it matters, right? But they have 105, 108, 112, 115, 118, 122, 126. Like it's literally 3 to 4 pound step each time, going from minimum weight to flyweight, super flyweight, bantamweight, etc. Like that's part of the problem for me. Like there's just so many fighters and so many divisions that it kind of clouds who should I care about, right? Like that's one of my main things. And you mentioned the multiple different deals, right? Like you gotta have Showtime, you gotta have ESPN Plus, or you gotta have access to the zone. Like it's very expensive to be a boxing fan compared to UFC fans. Just two other thoughts, obviously, before we get into the money debate about pay-per-views, where you're going to crush me. I just want to bring that up too. Like that's one thing that really, really makes it hard. And number 2, like I think MMA crushes on social media, right? Like it really, really appealing to a younger generation, and they promote each of the guys. And I could tell you 10 things about most MMA fighters. And basically I have to ask you, Ron, who is this guy in boxing to understand, like, is this an important fight, right? Like I know probably the top 10 to 15 names, but knowing anything beyond that is very, very difficult. So yeah, maybe if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that's honestly a great point. I mean, I don't really know why there's as many weight classes as there is. I mean, the inverse of that is like, why doesn't MMA have more weight classes? So I think actually, like, using Ryan Garcia as an example, there's controversy in his fight with Tank with the rehydration clause. So from my side as a boxing fan, I think that having watched, there's a pretty big difference moving up 5 pounds, 5 to 7 pounds between lightweight to super lightweight to welterweight. And that's exactly why Tank put in that rehydration clause that Ryan couldn't regain more than 10 pounds between, the weigh-in the night before and fight night. And then you hear Ryan, saying that that's the reason why he lost. He weight drained him. At the end of the day, to put a point in that, you don't make excuses as a fighter. You signed up for that. You knew full well what you were taking on, and if you didn't like that, you shouldn't have signed that agreement. So Ryan needs to man up and kind of own that loss. But for me, I think the weight classes are there to protect the fighters. Devin Haney, for example, I think he rehydrated over 15 pounds or 15, between 15 and 20 pounds. And he was actually, even though despite he was moving up from 135 to 140, he was bigger that night than Regis Prograis, who was, much more experienced and fought longer at 140. So I think the multiple weight classes, my guess is that are to protect fighters from someone coming in, 140 on the weigh-in and then weighing 165 pounds on fight night, to use an extreme example. That's just unsafe, in my opinion.
That's a big thing in MMA too, right? It's like some of these guys, they weigh in 30 pounds more than they do before. And I think that's probably to catch some heat and some attraction to be in McGregor's division, right? A lot of the time it's just about one or two guys, right? Like we see McGregor go up in weight classes to fight, the best people. And that's something that, like, if there were more weight classes, he wouldn't have to do such a dangerous cut. And all these guys do. Like, I think the best example is the new English guy, Paddy Pimblett. Like, he fights at 155, but like after the UFC, he probably weighs in about like 195, 200. So he's literally, probably cutting like 40 pounds, and you can easily die doing that. So that's
what is that? 20 pints of Guinness.
200 kebabs or something like that. But yeah, let's get to the point where you crush me in this debate, and let's look at the money, man. You tell me about like some of the biggest pay-per-views in boxing histories, just so we can get our comparison right for the audience.
Yeah. Can you pull up that link that I sent you?
Yeah. Right. And let me just once you start, while I get this screen share ready.
Okay. So I think when talking about money, we have to acknowledge that boxing's been around for a much, much longer time than MMA and the UFC. So it makes sense. There's more infrastructure. There has been a long time audience. They figured out the economics of how to market and sell fights. So Naveen pulled up the list of the top 20 pay-per-view fights since 2019. So what I'll call the post-Floyd era. You can see at the very top of it, Tank Ryan is 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. And all the way at the bottom, I think
we got Pacquiao Ugas.
Yeah, it's around 250K.
Yep.
So when you layer on, Money Mayweather, and he has a nickname for a reason, I'll just rattle off the top 4 Floyd pay-per-views, which are also the top 4 pay-per-views fights by pay-per-view buys ever. Floyd versus Pacquiao, 4.6 million buys, 410 million total revenue. Floyd versus Conor McGregor, 4.3 million buys, just under 400 million of revenue. Floyd versus Canelo, 2.2 million, 150 million of revenue. And Floyd versus Oscar De La Hoya, 2.48 million buys and 136 million total revenue. So you can see that all of Floyd's fights have not only are not only the highest grossing fights ever, but they're multiples of the next most successful, financially successful fights. And then I'll turn it over to Naveen to go over what the top MMA fights and the pay-per-view buys look like.
Yeah, so just to give you guys accurate comparison, like I don't have the minus Floyd kind of angle, but I do have the top 10 UFC pay-per-views in history. And again, similar story, guys. Top 4 are McGregor. We got McGregor Aldo. We got Usman Masvidal, Alvarez McGregor. Now we start getting into millions, 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. McGregor Donald Cerrone. And then we got McGregor Diaz 1. We got Lesnar versus Frank Mir. And really beyond that, it's just McGregor. We've really only got one huge star to our name, but one thing is that The first boxing match sanctioned in history, 1681. The first MMA fight with the UFC, 1993, right? So that's kind of my thing, right? You know, in physics, you have a concept of velocity versus acceleration, right? So obviously, boxing has the velocity, right? They have the magnitude of all these wins and all the money flowing into it. But who's growing more? UFC is growing like crazy, and they're sort of taking over with the younger divisions here. Obviously, we got, you know, number 2 is Poirier McGregor, the third one, and number 1 is Khabib Connor. Iconic fight in the history of fighting, right? With you know, everything that went down. You know, stop talking, send location. The famous you know, brawl of the bus in Barclays. Yeah. You know, being so close to that and seeing some of these things happen, like, I just think it's a great sign for the sport, right? Like, tying it back to Jake Paul, though, right? This is one thing boxing does better, is the minimum UFC win or, you know, prize is $35,000. And in boxing, it's much higher, right? I think especially if you're going to go comparing how dangerous these sports are, both are very dangerous, but you got to understand that, like, when you're talking about fighting for someone's life, $35,000, that's like a minimum. That's a minimum, like, that's a poverty line, right? If you fight 2 times a year, you get to $70,000, which in, you know, JB's America doesn't do you that much. So this is not like something that, you know, should be taken lightly. Boxing does way better on this kind of stuff, and really, I mean, to kind of put an end on the debate, if you give MMA 100 years, and I do think that it will last 100 years, I like to compare again. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got us now. I know one of the gripes you have, Ron, is like the technical striking is not good. I'd have to agree with you, but I just, like, you mentioned that, you know, you're finding peace in the chaos. I find a lot of solace in the chaos of MMA because anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
It can be, obviously, the submission fights are typically boring, or grappling or wrestling based fights are boring for a lot of us, but you can go into a knee kick, you can kick someone, you can punch them, you can submit them, guillotine, whatever, and you don't know what's going to happen. So I think that's my end. Like, right, like, you have 15 ways to win, where in boxing you typically have 2, right? Technical win, technical landing more shots, and then obviously, you know, winning on the cards, you know, like being or, you know, knocking out your opponent. So that's really where I come at it. So for our last segment here, playing a little bit of homage to NBA on TNT. They have Who He Play For. This is my version of that. Who Next, right? So this is going to be a section about, you know, an up and coming boxer who, you know, everybody doesn't know, but I think you should start watching. For me, it's a guy named Xander Zayas. He is 21 years old. He lives in Florida right now, but he grew up in Puerto Rico. He's a super welterweight, so he's about 140 pounds when he fights. 18 wins, 12 knockouts. So I think that, you know, Ron and I, you know, watched him one night, and I was like, damn, this guy's good. He's really technical, very, very aggressive too. So it's never going to be really that boring when you watch this type of boxing. Sometimes with, like, you know, it's not as exciting to watch like these defensive fighters. He's not a defensive fighter, so you don't have to worry about that. He brings the heat, and he's getting to be a big draw. So excited to watch him. Ron, you got one?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go. You know, echo Naveen. Xander Zayas is immensely talented, super exciting, also super technical. You know, excited to see where he goes. My pick is going to be Brandon Lee. That's Brandon with a U instead of a O, Lee. And if you look him up, I call him Mini Bruce Lee because he actually looks just like Bruce Lee. So, you know, someone ordered the DNA test.
And Bruce Lee's son's name is actually Brandon Lee. I don't know if you know that. So that's
that's
why.
There's maybe Bruce had a little fun while he's traveling and some extramarital stuff happened. But tangent aside, Brandon Lee is 28-0 with 23 KOs. He has power in both hands. Also offensive minded fighter, but I like that he looks tight. He's got good movement. He's not the fastest, slickest guy, but he's, I think, polished enough where I think he'll continue to rise up the ranks. 23 years old, so also young gun from NorCal, and he's half Korean, half Mexican. So I think that's he looks more Korean than Mexican, but the way he fights, you can definitely see the Mexican blood in him. He fights at 140, so I'm really interested to see if he gets matched up with the likes of Haney, Ryan Garcia, Tank whenever he decides to move up, or Shakur Stevenson, and see how he does. I don't know if I'd put him in that class of fighter yet, but he's definitely someone to keep on the radar.
Cool. Thanks, Ron. It was really great getting your input today. We touched a lot of topics, a lot of big money fights, good debate on MMA versus boxing. Just want to leave you with our pick again. Anthony Joshua, minus 300-ish. Also over.
Parlay it. Gotta parlay it.
Gotta parlay it. Or if you want to be, a little spicy and want to fight against your bookie, book in that Anthony Joshua in decision, man. Plus 300. I think that's a good value. If that'll probably pay you more than parlaying it. So that's a smarter way to go. Again, fade the Barber Shop. Let's all pray for Ryan Garcia's mental health and make sure that we see that big money fight coming up. Thanks again, Ron. This was Locky Top Sports Boxing Edition. Locky Top out.
It's fun having